Okay, so I'm going to start with a sort of a refresher, except the file wasn't available last time I described its availability was coming, um, in terms of accessing the template file. So I'm actually on the Unify public-facing website, unify.com.au or unify-software.com. And if you go to that home page or any page actually within the web application or within the website, and you scroll down the bottom, you'll get to the bottom and there'll be this community column. And then within that community column, there's Unify and Power BI as a link and a whole bunch of other things as well. And something worth noting, just as I do that, is that this chat, Zendesk chat box, you may or may not be aware of, is not just for inquiries about purchasing our software, but if you had a quick question, you were using our tool and something wasn't right or you didn't know how to do it, feel free to use that function. And someone's sitting there waiting patiently to respond to any requests that you guys have. So if you're using the tool and you're not sure what's going on, you can come to our website and just ask a question down there. That's a free service, and hopefully that will help get your questions answered. Um, but yeah, to access the template file, which I recommend you do, and it has been updated since we then published it a week ago and told everyone it was there. It's been updated. So if you've downloaded it before then, you may want to, and you haven't done much development in it, you may want to throw that one away and come back and do this one. If you have done a lot of development in the last week, then you're probably best to continue on. Um, and one of the things ongoing about this is once you've built your own visualizations, you'll have to maintain your own file, but we're quite happy for you to email us that file if there's any questions you have around it, and we can review and perhaps amend to any issues you might be having. But we'll be updating our own template over time. But if you've already gone and built your own visualizations, you would have to, you could compare the two and maybe copy some of the visualizations we build if you find them interesting. Otherwise, yeah, just keep going on your own. That's what it's there for. We don't know how people want to use and access the data in Unify. There's so much of it. There's so many ways to look at it. So yeah, I've clicked on that Power BI link from the homepage, and I'm now on the Power BI landing page. And you can see there's a link here to the template, which if I click on it, will download a PBIX file, which I'll open in a minute. But you'll also see that there's a sort of scroll through video section as well. And so at the moment there's only two, and that's going to grow out quite rapidly over time. So definitely keep coming back, and there'll be both these recordings of our webinars, but also short videos on how to do things. So this video here takes you through how to connect to the sample file. We've tweaked it a little bit since then, so that'll have to be updated. But I mean, the majority of that video is still fine to follow. It's just there's only one parameter now rather than two. And so feel free to watch that video, or if you wanted to watch last week's webinar, that's on there as well. And today's will be there within 24 hours of this session finishing. So I've downloaded that Unified template file, and then you will open it up. You can click on it from there or open it from within Power BI Desktop. So last week we went through accessing Power BI Desktop from the Microsoft Marketplace. So assuming you've installed that, you open up the file. And then throughout this webinar, we're going to need to try and practice our patience. So one of the things with Power BI is it's a heavy processing beast because it's processing all that data, and we're opening up a file that already has a model in it, so it's initializing the model, and that can take a little bit of time, especially if you're on a bit of a lightweight laptop, which is what I'm on. So get yourself the biggest beast of a computer you can possibly get your company to convince you to have, or you can convince them to have, more to the point, and you'll be definitely having less go and get yourself a cup of tea moments with this file. And so it opens up automatically, and the first thing you need to do is convert it to be reading your data rather than this dummy data that we've got it pointing to at the moment. So the template file comes out with a bunch of visualizations, which I'm going to go through in a moment, but it also is connecting to a data set that you don't have access to, you wouldn't be able to refresh, and obviously isn't your data. So what you need to do is, last week we showed this, but there's a subtle difference, and I'll just do it again because I didn't go through the whole thing last week. So if you click Transform Data, that opens up the Power Query Editor. So you'll see the Power Query Editor is written up the top of the window. So there's a second window opened up. And when that loads, these are all the endpoints that we went through last week. Is how you access your data in Unify, and I'll take you through more of that today. But the key bit to converting it to connect to your deployment is this parameter down here. And so if you click on that, it'll come up with a current value, which will be major projects, which is our dummy deployment. Now, to demonstrate this, what I'm going to do is connect to our own deployment. So our Unify, the company, we use Unify extensively and have done for 17 years. So we run our own business using our own software. And in IT land, that's called eating your own dog food. So we called our deployment dog food. And so what we would need to do is change the parameter, the URL to dog food. So if yours is, yourcompany.unify.com.au, whatever your company is, then that's what you would put in there. Whatever the URL is that you access Unify on a regular basis. Now, that's basically going to update where these endpoints connect to. And that's all you need to do, but it will ask for your authentication. So when I click close and apply, it's now going to try and pull back all the data from dog food. It can't do that until I've given it an authentication. So just be patient and it'll eventually pop up with accessing this. You'll need to know how your system authenticates. Some are Windows authentication, some are basic. If you have to type in a username and password using a form, or you've got Office 365 single sign-on, that means you've got basic authentication. If you access it automatically and you don't ever log in, chances are that you've got a Windows login, and you can kind of tell when you're in a Unify deployment. I'll just log into major projects. If you click the little hamburger here, it'll show you this. And if that username there has a domain in front of it with a slash or a backslash, then you are Windows authentication. And so that's one way you can check. And so now it's still waiting for me to put in that username and password, which I'm going to do. Now, it's pretty important to get this bit right, because what it's going to do is try and log in on every endpoint going down this page. You can see all of them down here, right? And if you put the wrong password in, it'll reject that login, and Unify will lock you out of your system. So you'll then need to get a system administrator to unlock your account and be able to get back into using Unify and refreshing the Power BI file. So that's a pretty important step. Now, that's going to go and run like that little circle of death on the connect button for quite some time, and we don't want to sit through this webinar waiting for that to happen. So I'm going to let it run in the background. Hopefully my computer will cope with 2 Power BI files open, because what I've done is I've also got another file open, which is the same template, but still connecting to the major projects deployment. And so what I wanted to run you through is what's in that sample template. It was still being worked on last time we did a webinar. It's now published. It's out there for you to have a look at. And these are some of the sample visualizations we've got. Now, the goal with these visualizations is not really to come up with visualizations that may solve and create outcomes for you that you want. It's mainly to demonstrate how to use the endpoints. And so, you can see how we've built these visualizations using the endpoints and get a feel for where the data comes from and how it works, and some little intricacies of Power BI as well. And so that's its main goal. And then you can go from that and build up knowledge of your own data, and you'll work out how to analyze it. You can chat to us about some ideas as well, but this is mainly a generic, this is how you would do some basic stuff. And some of the things we've got here is, we've got slices, which is basically what Power BI calls filters that you can put within the page for end users, as opposed to using them over here in the desktop environment, or when you publish it, having it over on the right-hand side. You've got these embedded slices within the report. What we've also built within this template is the ability to example some sort of drill through capability within Unify. So this is an issues dashboard. You can see along the bottom, or issues report. Along the bottom, I've got a whole bunch of different reports, and we're going to have a look at those. But you'll see quite commonly there's issues and then issues detail, risks and then risk detail. That's basically set up to do a drill through. Over here, we've got, I'll just blow this one up a little bit. And I'll get rid of the filters section. This is a list of who's the hardest worker in our major projects deployment. And so Clint Martin's at the top, and he's done the most amount of hours. And so, he's got the most number of issues, the timesheet one as well. I should read what I'm actually looking at. So he's got the most number of issues assigned to him. He's also doing the most hours, so that's probably why. when I click the right mouse button, Power BI comes up with this drill through. And what that enables me to do is basically go through and see what are the issues that Clint has assigned to him. And so when I click that, it takes me to the other screen and it already filters it with the issues assigned to Clint. And I'll just blow that up so you can see that a little bit better. Whoops, wrong button, that one there. And you can read them and have a look at what has been assigned to him. And if you think, oh, that's particularly interesting, what is that one all about? For example, rock found during car park excavation. What we've got is a link back into Unify here that you can click on that'll take you to the issue itself. And hopefully, if it's being well managed, there'll be lots of comments and potentially emails logged against it and the like. So we click on that, it logs us into Unify, and there's absolutely nothing there. We'll just quickly try another one. And again, but if you've used Unify's issue system, you'll know the kind of content that can come in here with actions and comments and other things to resolve it. So hopefully within a few clicks, you can get to quite a lot of detail about an issue if you need to. And we started from a pie chart or a funnel graph of who's got the most issues assigned. You can see that the other file that I was working on that was changing to dog food is now flashing in the background. So if I click on that, you'll see it's creating the connection. So obviously put the right password in. Now it's loading data into the model. So you should get all of this when you connect it to your system. This should all happen. And and then once it's finished, it'll return to the visualization behind it and refresh it with any data that that exists relating to that visualization, which will be completely different to the one we can see in the background now. Just had my dog join me. You're going to become quite famous, Gandalf. And so that's now refreshed, which means that all of this data is now dog food. And I would just go File, Save As, dog food, and I'll just save it somewhere else because that's going to overwrite. And you now basically can do whatever you like. You've got your file ready to hum. Just checking no one else is waiting in the waiting room. All right, so I'm going to close that file down. That'll release a bunch of resources from my computer, enabling me to run the rest of the webinar without fear of dying. Okay, so what we've gone through first is converting the application to your data, and then we've just looked at the first visualization and some of the things you can do around slicing and dicing. I want to see issues created within a time period. I only want to look at a certain project, and you get that project's view of the world. And you know, the dashboards are actually interactive as well. If I wanted to see how these charts would update if I just looked at the communications count of issues, they all update, and you can see you've got little shrinks and who's actually got assignments there, and you can hover over it to get more detail. And you can change the way that interacts. You can have it where it just shows the donut based on that communications. If you click the communication again, it goes back to everything else having everything. And then there's one little trick with regards to these details pages. You can see that it's still filtered on Clint Martin only. If I wanted to actually use this as an interface rather than as a drill through, you can see the little up arrow takes you back to where your drill through comes from, back to the issues dashboard. But if I wanted to just use this on its own as a visualization and get different people, like I've got assigned to here, but I click on it, only has Clint's name. What you need to do is you need to go to the visualizations section, and down the bottom, you'll see how the drill through is working. It's got those filters already assigned. So I need to basically clear the filter of Clint. It's not actually in the filters column, just to be obtuse. It's in the visualizations column. And if I clear that filter, it'll now allow me to, select any person as an assigned to and just use it as its own visualization rather than a drill through visualization. So you can then play around with that, and you could create more slices in there, but that's just something that I didn't know how to do until about 8 o'clock this morning. And so I thought it'd be something worth telling you all about. And it was, a bit obtuse and the way I found, and for all of this stuff, the way as the team have developed what we've known to date over the last couple of years of working in Power BI is our friend Google. There is a lot of Power BI online support for that. So Google it, as a teacher at my son's school used to say, and you'll get what you need. All right, so what else have we got in here? And let's have a look at these in a little bit more detail. You've got different visualizations in each of these, just to play around with the sort of capability that comes out of the box. I'd also recommend looking at some of the marketplace visualizations. We've got a box and whisker one there that we use on benchmarking that I don't think is in this sample file, a Gantt chart that you can build out of Power BI. And so to do that, you click this little plus and you can get more visuals, and it'll take you to the marketplace and you can do searches, and there's a whole stack of them. But out of the box, it comes with their standard little neat ones, and we've got a whole variety of them in the sample file. Each of these visualizations, and you don't need 4 on a screen, it was just a random thing that we did, can be focused on. And you can also build drill throughs on these sorts of things, depending on how you structured the data. And so this is going to do it by date. At the moment, we've got just yearly data. If I click this little drill through, it's a different type of drill through. It's an expansion of the hierarchy. So instead of going through the underlying record, it's just giving me that broken down now into quarters. And then again, if I do it again, into months. And so you can set that sort of data up using date hierarchy. You can see over here, created date hierarchy that has been put in place. You can do that where it doesn't tag the year, it just does the quarter. And so this is just looking at, seasonal differences. So, GST reporting for revenue for JobKeeper, if you're in Australia trying to get government money for that, that would compare quarterly revenues by quarter for these periods that you've got here, 2013 through to 19. So play around with that. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do with drill through. This is kind of like a pie, but it just shows it as rectangles. It's and again, you've got that drill through function. You can see right click to drill through. So this has 8 risks, this project. If I wanted to see them, I can right click, drill through, go to risk details, and it takes me to that risk details tab. And I've got the data around those risks being shown there. And once again, a link through the risk itself. I'll come back to this in a moment and just show you these conditional formatting as well. So if I've wanting to see some detail around that, what's this material price increase due to tight supply? What are we actually doing about it? What's the conversations? I can click on that link, takes me into Unify, and I get a gobbledygook step to mitigate. And our mate Clint's been assigned again, and wow, he is seriously overdue. Poor old Clint. We're not making his day. These are called conditional formatting. And so the way that works is all Power BI. So all of the visualizations is Power BI. And if I click on this particular link, actually it's the untreated level one is what I want. You'll see remove conditional formatting. So there's obviously some already there, and conditional formatting. And what I've done to get this to work is background and font color. So you've got to do both, otherwise the text will still come in. And so Unify will come out with a rating, in text, very high, medium, low. And there'll also be a number next to it, like a rating number. And we're using the number, the level number, because conditional formatting works better with numbers. And so when I select background color, it pops up a dialog box for me to set up my conditional formatting in. And you can see what the rules are there. I know that there's only going to be 5 levels, 5 risk levels. And I know that 1 is the highest and 5 is the lowest. And then I've just used the paletted theme colors that exist to do the traditional red is bad and blue is good kind of gradient. And you can do whatever you like. You hate that color, you hate this visualization, you can create it yourself, which is fantastic. And so that's how those colors are coming in there. And so that's the interaction between the risk details and the risk dashboard that you can play around with. If I go to timesheets, we've just got some basic stuff around utilization. But what it will do is it'll help you get your head around measures. And so if I click on a visualization, what happens, and again, I'll put it in focus mode, it puts the relevant fields I've used in this visualization into the visualization section. So I can actually have a look at it. If I've not clicked on it, there's 4 visualizations in the screen. It'll display nothing in these columns. I'll minimize the filters one. And what happens is if I scroll down, you'll see that it ticks which endpoints I'm using. So you'll be able to see which endpoints we're using by having a look at each of the visualizations. And when I expand an endpoint, it then brings in all the fields. And what you'll notice is that some fields have a little funny symbol against them, and others have little calculator symbols against them, and then others have sigma, and then others have none. The sigma and the none are Unify fields. The sigma represents that the field is actually a number field, so it can be summed and have other aggregates done to it. And so that's why it's a sigma. These are number data types. The rest aren't number data types, so it doesn't have that symbol. This symbol is a calculated column. It's a Power BI column. So we've created it in our sample template, but it's actually manipulating the data that's coming out of Unify to create a calculation. And in this instance, just the cost of a resource, which is their rate times their hours. And so you can see there, that's the formula, timesheet hours times timesheet cost rate. It's a row by row thing. That's what a calculated column is. It does it row by row rather than aggregates. Whereas measures, which are these calculators, they're done as aggregates. So they'll need some sort of sum or average or some sort of calculation to aggregate. And so what we've got in here is calculated measures to determine, we've got a bunch of flags in Unify when you timesheet. And so when people timesheet to tasks, doesn't matter, they can have 1,000 tasks, they can get aggregated into pools. And those pools are billable time, non-billable time, leave, and marketing. And so by flagging those tasks as being one of those 4 options, the aggregated time can come in against those. And so in this measure here, you can see we use the divide function that handles divide by 0 problems. So definitely use the divide function. Non-billable time divided by total timesheet time. And you see there's an aggregate there, sum. Non-billable is already an aggregate, so you don't need to do it again. So if that's that measure there, if I click on it, it'll say sum the number of hours. And so these are measures that exist in the system, and we're using those measures to calculate the percentages of non-billable, of leave, of marketing, and billable. And in this particular visualization, we're just chucking them all in as values and saying, give me a pie chart on that, or a donut in this instance. And that's it. So you will see a bunch of measures in different endpoints. If I was to come out of this timesheet one and go to cash flow, you'll see that we've got a cash flow not quite S curve going over time. And if you click on that visualization, what you'll see is these values here, which have been relabeled, but where they come from is when you hover on it, the cumulative current budget cash flow. And again, if I scroll along the endpoints, so you can see which endpoints are being used. And if I expand the cash flow one, you'll see that there are measures there that we've created for you to help you do a cumulative cash flow. Otherwise, it's just the cash flow for that month. What we're doing in this one is we're summing up, like inception to date is a common phrase for it, or project to date. So it's the cumulative value over time of a project or a portfolio's cash flows. And we've got that on a number of different measures. So actual cash flow, actual and forecast. So that's where you have actuals where actuals exist and remaining forecasts for the rest. And that's this red and black graph here. And then the current budget. And so they're 3. And then you can have just forecast, which doesn't have actuals in it. And then you can have net. So this one automatically nets out revenue and cost. You don't need to do that yourself. It just automatically does it. We've got profit. We've got actual revenue by month. So you could chart that. And that's this one here. It's by month rather than cumulative. So that's already there for you. And if you wanted to see the detail, that's in there. So if I was to tick 300 Melville Road, the graphs change to be 300 Melville Road, and the cash flow profiles are there for me to have a look at, which I can blow up and have a look. And so very quickly, I can analyze a specific project versus the entire portfolio. If I click on its name again, then that takes me back to everything in the portfolio. Now I can put sector and other filters in here as much as I like. And so it's up to you. Download the file, have a look, go through the different ones, just finishing the job. That is a replication of our standard cost module dashboard. So it has all the same fields. So it's a good way to check that the numbers are coming out right. And that's what we built that one for. And so it has the untended, the approved variations possible. It'll mirror identically what you get out of the cost module or revenue module. So if I change this to contracted view, that particular one is doing the post-contract chart of accounts. Those values will be the same as what's in here. And you can compare that and have a look at that and make sure that's the case. And then you know you've got all that data happening. Again, it's telling you where the endpoints are coming from. And when I expand that, you'll see again that there's measures in there that we've built for you to use that just show you the approved budget, the original budget, and the transfers. If you come down, it'll then have contract values as well, which will have measures for you to use to get those values as well. Original cost, pending contract. So that's all there for you to use and to generate that visualization. Project tracking uses the speedometer dials to look at actuals to date, remaining forecast and at completion, and trying to get little budget target lines in there to see where you're at. Has an S-curve. Variations, where are they coming from? How much of variations were submitted by the builder versus approved? In this one, the superintendent is being incredibly generous by giving them more than what's been submitted. That's just a data quality thing, because submitted hasn't been put against most of them, because that submitted value field didn't exist 12 months ago. So a lot of old data doesn't have it. So yeah, so that's, builder submits A or contractor submits A, you approve B, approve is column black and submitted is blue. That's another example of a visualization you can use. And then variations detail. So you've got this functionality has drill through to say, okay, there's the latent conditions. If I click on that and then expand that, it'll show me what they are and what the size of them are. But I might also want to get some drill through into the detail of that, and I can go show me the variation detail. Takes me to the variation page, which again, I could have a link which doesn't have it here back into the Unify to see that, but they're the actual line items making up variations. And that's it. That's the templated file. Like I said, there's quite a number there. There's about 20 visualizations to look at. There's lots of measures to see how they work. You may need to build more measures to do what you need to do. Hopefully the 30 or 40 measures that we've created in the system will help you do that. Because I mean, there's various challenges with regards to profitability in Unify. It depends on your deployment, how you're tracking profitability, what type of business you are. If you're a managing contractor slash subcontractor, you're probably going to be using the revenue and cost module only. If you're a practice, you'll be using the timesheet system and charge rates and cost rates and things like that. So it really just depends on what type of business you are, how you want to structure your profit tracking, and what data you're capturing. You can't get a profit at completion if you're not forecasting. And if that's for a practice, you need to be forecasting hours, and not many people are doing that in the deployments that we have so far. So without forecasting hours, we don't know what the forecast costs are going to be. You can forecast revenue quite quickly, but the costs are a challenge if you don't have resource planning hours. And just as a heads up, we're looking at fancier ways of doing that for our 16 release. So that'll be coming in a webinar in June, no doubt. And there's some exciting stuff in that. So that's using our template file. What I want to do now is, one of the things missing out of the template file is custom fields. And so I'm just going to take you through how you would connect to the custom field endpoints, one endpoint in this demonstration, and what other ones are out there to use, and take you through a step-by-step process of doing that, because it's a little bit different, and you need to, if I record it, you'll have it. Plus, we'll be the training video of this week, we'll be doing that as well. So we'll be publishing a step-by-step training video of doing this process. The reason it's not in the templated file is because they're custom fields, and hence every deployment will have their own ones, and the system won't allow you to configure it to handle a different custom field. It's going to expect the ones that you set up in this process. So before I move into that, I'll just pause for breath, check on the group, and see if there are any questions with what we've gone through to date. Feel free to use the chat function, so we don't have to unmute and keep the background noise going. All good. Okay, just going to go back to this issues one. So the first step what we're going to do basically is create another table here. And we're going to connect to the project endpoint. And within the project endpoint, it has the custom fields. And when we created the project endpoint initially, we just ignored those. We didn't bring them in. So you have a project table here already. Here it is, project. And if you expand that table, the fields in that table do not include custom fields. So they include all the fields that are out of the box fields in Unify. And what I want to do now is create a second table that is just specifically for project custom fields. And so to do that, I need to tell Power BI Desktop that I want to get some more data. And they've got this little function here called get data. And I click that and I click web. And it's going to bring up a dialog box. And I'm going to use this advanced method because that enables me to use the parameter that we set up that connects to our data source. So if I select advanced, the first bit will be the parameter. And the parameter we're going to use, there's only one now, it's called URL. And that sets up the basic URL structure, which is majorprojects.unify.com.au or yourcompany.unify.com.au or whatever your URL is when you log into the system. You can always see it in a web browser up the top here before the slash. That's what we've put in. Then I need to append to it the endpoint that I want to access. So I can just put all of it is through /API. All the endpoints come after the term /API. And I type project, and that's it. I'm done. Now, last week we mentioned if you want to know what the endpoints are, you can go into Unify, click on the hamburger, and go to API documentation. And it'll list all the endpoints that come after the term API. So API/budget, API/budget snapshot. They're the endpoints that we're connecting to, and they're all listed there. You can scroll down and see all the different ones you can use. And so I've done that. That's all I need to do. And what happens now, when I click OK, it'll open up the Power Query editor again, and it'll sort of pull all the data from the project endpoint, and it'll be ready for me to transform it. So it'll extract the data first, and I'm going to need to transform it into the project custom field table that I want to use. And that has worked. So what you get is this pre-transformed list of nothing. And you can see down here, the little symbol against project 2 is a little bit different because I haven't transformed it yet into a table. And the first thing I'm going to do is just change its name to project. I'm going to follow the naming convention, which I'm terrible at doing, which is everything's lowercase in this instance. And then what I do, so that changes that down there, now becomes the project custom fields, is I click this little button up here saying convert to table. And that's going to chug along and do some stuff. It'll ask me, how do I want to transform that? And you literally just take the defaults. Just click OK. And so what that's done is now transformed it into a table, but we still only have one column in our table. We haven't told it how to delimit one piece of information to a next. And that's pretty easy to do because it gives us a little button here to click on, which is what we're going to do to transform our project custom field data. Now, I've already got the project endpoint, so I actually don't need much of this. So I'm just going to untick that. I'm going to click load more, so did that the wrong way around, didn't I? And then untick again. And I'm looking for the field that says custom fields. And I'm going to tick that. I think it has the project ID. That's the Unify ID, which is our key that we need, but I'm just going to tick that just in case. I can remove it later. It's not something I do every day, so I've forgotten. And the other thing is, see that column 1? It's going to prepend that. I put a prefix on it, so it'll be column1.custom field. I don't want that because column 1 doesn't mean anything, so I'm just going to untick that. While that's running, I'll just go and shut that noise off for a second. Hang on. The domestic bliss of working from home. Okay, So what's that done is it's brought in the project ID, which is the Unify ID. It's not your project ID that you might have in your deployment that you'd be familiar with. And it's brought in another transformation on the custom field. There's now a list. And I'm going to expand that again. And this time it asks me, how do I want to do that? Well, I actually want to have new rows for every custom field. So that means that the project ID will repeat down the page. At the moment, that project ID is a unique list, but it's going to become a multi-record thing. So 451 will, if it had custom fields, will repeat. Then the next step, we need to transform it again. So we click this button again, and it's going to bring in two fields, the name of the custom field and its value. And this time I'm going to tick that little box so it brings in custom field.name, not just name, because name doesn't mean anything. Then I need to remove all the nulls, which is relatively simple. You click that drop down and you just say untick null, and that's that. And then the tricky part. What we want to do is we don't want them to be records. Records are rows, right? So you can see Fika repeats and UCA repeats down there. That's going to make it hard to use in visualization. So what we actually want to do is pivot this information so that the custom field names become column headings, and the value that they have is obviously the value. And so that will bring it back to being a unique record per project with lots of columns depending on how many custom fields you have. And this deployment has a lot. And so the way we do that is we use this thing called transform in the transform ribbon. And we say pivot column. And that basically means we're going to turn it from being rows into columns. And when we do that, it'll ask what should be the value field. So we've got a column heading. What value should I put into that? And obviously that's going to be the custom field value. That's quite an easy thing. But there's a little trick, right? You got to expand this advanced option and say don't aggregate. Otherwise, it'll put in an aggregate number, which we don't want. We want the actual number that someone has keyed into that custom field. What is Fika? It's 5,500. We don't want it to be aggregated in any way. And so once I click OK to that, what's going to happen is we're going to get lots of columns going across here. And the number of rows will reduce dramatically because it'll be one row per project. And you can see now we only got one row for 452. And we've got lots and lots and lots and lots of custom fields. Then the last bit, this is the last step, so sorry if you're bored, it's not going to go for much longer. We have to actually tell Power BI Desktop what these fields are. And that's another reason why we pivot them, because if you've got a mixture of text and number-based custom fields and date-based custom fields, if you leave it all in one column, then you can't do anything with that. You can't aggregate, you can't use the dates as axes for a graph, etc. So now you have to painfully go through. This is only a once, you only have to do this once, by the way. Unless you add more custom fields, then you'd have to do it for those custom fields as well. But yeah, you don't have to do this once. But once you've done it up, it'll refresh the data and you're good to go. So you click on these ABC 1, 2, 3 for each of these, and you tell the system what it is. That's a whole number because that's our index, right? Fika is a decimal number. You would think most people wouldn't put a decimal place in for Fika, but you never know. So you just do decimal number. And you keep doing that all the way along. You'll know your own data, how you want to define it, and just see if there's anything here that might be text or dates. Anyway, so if there was, you would just select, date time or date or percentage text. If it's a true false, you can select that. So you choose which one of these you select, and it's written in a fairly end-user friendly way. Anyone's worked with data before will recognize those data types. And you've got to do that for all of these columns. Once you're happy that that's been done, you can click close and apply, and that will close down this screen and take us back to the other. So close down Query Editor and take us back to the visualizations. That close and apply is on the home ribbon, and we click close and apply. It's now going to go back to Unify. It's going to pull all that data into the system, because in the Query Editor it only does a preview window, doesn't bring all the data in, just gives you a preview. And so it's creating, now that creating a connection in the model is a little bit of a nuisance thing. detecting relationships, sorry, is the nuisance thing. It tries to be clever. It does make me a little bit concerned about how good artificial intelligence is going to be, because it's not very clever. It never gets it right. And you have to get your relationships set up yourself. And that could freak people out on this call, but look, it's not that hard. And if you just copy the recording plus the demonstration that will come later, you'll see it. So in the modeling subnav or ribbon, you've got manage relationships. When you click that, it'll have all the relationships that already exist in the templated file. And then the new one, which is the project custom field one that we called project custom field. These are sortable, and at the moment it's sorted in the from table. So project custom field is going to be down here. Now you can see that it decided to put an ID, and maybe someone watching this will know that there's a way you can stop it doing this, but anyway, I don't know what it is. It's decided to connect the project custom field ID with everything in the system that's got an ID. They're all irrelevant. So you just, except for this one here, which is the project ID to the project ID, right? So that's that ID to that ID is the one we want. We just need to delete all the others. And you can see that that's not going to take 2 seconds, but you do need to delete all of these, including the one that it decided would be the one it used. And this is how information relates to one another. This is how we can select something from the project table and then get something back from the project custom field table. It's connecting on these IDs. And so, you know, without those, you won't be successful. All right, and then on this last one, we just hit tick that, and we're good to go. And so now what we can do is we can actually use that information in our visualization, which I'll just do now once it's finished doing its work. I'll just create a new page. We just created a new page. Just click that little plus there, page 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the project table. You can see projects expanded already, and just click name, and that'll bring in all of the projects that exist in this database, whether they're currently running or finished in the past or whatever. And then I come down to the project custom fields, and I can just tick the one called Fika, and it will sum, because see, it's got that signal there, because that's the one I defined the field. Because I haven't defined the field on any of these others, there's nothing I can do with them. But until I go through and manually change the data type to being a number or a text or a date, there's not a lot you can do with it. So you need to do that step. I didn't finish it because you would have all left and it would have been midnight by the time that happened. And you can see now that we've got that. Now, I did say that we put it as a decimal, and you've got 2 decimal places there. I'll just blow that up. You can format that yourself within this screen by clicking on it, and you'll see it comes up with this format that you would probably be familiar with in Excel and the like. So you can just say 0 decimal places, and it'll update now, and 1000 will be 1000, not 1000.0. Lost my commas though, so we might want to put them back in. There we go. And so I've just quickly created a custom field that now has, I mean, a visualization that now has the fully enclosed covered area of all the projects I worked on. And if I wanted to turn that into a visualization, I could do a column graph on that. And there we go, we're done. And so that's what you need to do if there's custom field data, metadata fields in there that you want to use for filtering. So you can create any type of custom field in Unify. It could be a list, could be a number, could be a date, could be text, could be a file. That won't really come through to Power BI, but you know, there's a whole range of things you can create. And then through that process I just demonstrate, you can then use it as an aggregate to analyze information. And I'd strongly, think about how you're capturing your data at the moment, what extra fields you might need, and get that information into the system. And then you can play with it and visualize it through here. There's only one last piece I had on my agenda for this session, and it's probably the first entrance into advanced Power BI with Unify. So this is all Power BI with Unify. I don't think anyone in my company would call themselves a Power BI expert, but we're very familiar with Unify and its information and how it works. So that gives us a bit of a leg up. But one of the things that we found in the 2 years of working with Power BI is you need to put your measures in the relevant endpoint that you're aggregating, and it could mean a completely different thing, and you would use it for a different thing. And the best example I've got on that is the contract system. So in the contracts table, it's like a metadata table of the contract. It's the Unify's already got the aggregation. Hang on, I've got a couple of questions. Okay, so the majority of custom fields will be a mix of things. So you're just going to have to go through and define them. There won't be numbers. If they are numbers, you could define the first value column as a number and it'll convert all of them as numbers. I guess if it's greater than 50%, you're better off doing that. The question then was, what can we do with text fields? You can bring them in. So if you've got, for example, a status dashboard you want to create where someone has keyed into Unify an overall progress summary. So what people can do is they can go into Unify and maybe even as a periodic custom field rather than just a straight off custom field. People can month by month go in and I think we've got one example here, monthly status, right? This is called monthly status. COVID-19 was in town, so we did nothing, right? So that will then come through as text in the custom field called monthly status, and you could incorporate that into the dashboard so that all the project managers, distributed data capture, I got 500 projects, I got 30 project managers, they're all going in and doing that in Unify, but then I can get a consolidated dashboard that has those comments going down in a table potentially describing some of the information that I've displayed in a visualization. Or if it's just a project-based dashboard, you select the project, that commentary would come in. So text-based custom fields are valid. Excuse me. Yeah, but where I was back with where I was talking before. Hang on, another question. Oh, nope, I think I'm good. Where do you stick the measures? So if you look at these three, one is a summary. It's an aggregated endpoint. And so what it will do is it will tell you, for example, what the current original contract values are across all contracts on a portfolio or on a project or on a program. It doesn't have the line by line detail that goes underneath that, the deliverables and the variations and everything else. It just has the total. And if that's all you want in a dashboard, you just want to show the total contracted, then you're best off using that endpoint, and you can put measures in to sum them up. So for example, to know what's the forecast, you have to sum up these three to know what's the sort of pending forecast. And if you want to know what's committed, you have to sum original contract and approved variations. And so you need to create those measures. But because you're only wanting to, and that's that total committed and total pending, because you only want to do that at the contract level, you do it in there, it's nice and easy, and it's done. If you wanted to be able to sort of get more detail out of that and drill in, then you need to create the sort of same measures in the contract deliverable section. So original contract and pending contract are measures in the deliverables section to get the line by line detail that enables you to drill through and actually see what makes up that number. If you're looking at the contracts table, you're just seeing the aggregated number. So if you've got a contract with, well, you've got 20 contracts and each of them had 20 lines to them, you've got, a lot of, whatever that is, 400 deliverable line items in the system. This contract endpoint's already aggregated those, and you can just look at it. There's your value. Don't need to do any more. But if I wanted to see those 400 deliverables, I could still aggregate them up to one line. But if I wanted to be able to drill through and see them as well, then I have to do those aggregates in the contract deliverable table. So what I'm trying to say is you need to think of what data is in these tables. What am I trying to do? And where do I create the measure? And so create the measures in the relevant table where the data is. Don't create it in the project one, for example. Don't sum contract values in the project table. You're best doing that in the contract table or in the contract deliverable table, because what you'll miss is the ability to drill through and get that information. And it just seems more logical as where people are going to go to get that information. Where am I going to get contract information? From the contract tables. And so that's just something that we've picked up on. I initially was thinking that we'd just chuck metrics back into the project table, and you can actually aggregate to the project level from the contract table, and you can have original contract value in the project table. But then if you wanted to interrogate that information, it becomes a bit more problematic. So have a think about that when you're creating your measures. Measures go across tables, so you can, so long as there's a relationship between the tables, you can pull in the resource costs from the timesheet system and the procurement, purchasing costs from the cost table, and pull that all into the project table to get a combined total cost. There's another way of doing it. So there's many ways to skin a cat in this system. Spending time looking at the fields, what data comes out, just dragging them in as tables and having a look at what information's there will give you an idea. The templated file that we downloaded at the start has lots of measures and lots of examples. We'll see where we go with these webinars. We have dropped 50% of the people that attended the first one, so that could be good feedback. We'll see whether we continue them, whether there's demand, but we could potentially come up with an advanced Power BI where you might want to try and do something a bit more complicated. But hopefully that's given you a flavor of what you can do. My main goal was to be able to get you guys to connect A to the template and then B to your custom fields. I'm not sure if the box and whiskers template, visualization comes with the file. Sometimes when you share a file in Power BI, which we've done through the website, the custom visualizations you've put into that file come through, but there is no box and whiskers in this particular sample. And the reason we did that is the only way we use the box and whiskers is with custom fields. So because we didn't have any custom fields in the template, we couldn't really come up with a good way of doing it. But we use the box and whiskers to measure the difference in floor rates by element or by level 2, like superstructure, substructure, columns. So you could do it in an IT world on, project management hours versus system architect hours versus developer hours and BA hours. So those sorts of things. But typically you're going to need custom field data to get the right metric metadata, and you can then use a box and whiskers. If it doesn't come with it, it's pretty easy to find. So you just go to the marketplace, type box and whiskers, and it'll be there to add. The only issue there will be if your inhibitors of technology are stopping you from being able to add your own visualizations to Power BI because of some interesting reason that they can explain to you that I cannot. So I'm just going to open up our major projects, Power BI, and show you that box and whiskers. But while I'm doing that, I'll stop the recording because I think the demonstration's pretty much done. And take any more questions if you want to ask them.